Well, the Range Rover project seems to be taking some twists and turns. We are done with the head gasket and timing project, and overall I am really pleased with how that's turned out. I am working on that currently to get that video out to you guys. However, after starting the car up, we ran into a couple surprises that were not there when it came into the shop here a couple months ago. So I'm not sure if this was a part that was on its way out and just decided from sitting for a couple months if it was ready to say I'm done, but needless to say, we got to get these guys in. I'm guessing some of you guys know exactly what that is, but let's just put it this way. When I had the motor torn down to a short block, I could have probably swapped these out in 15 minutes. It would have been a relatively easy job, but they decided to present themselves as an issue once we had the motor complete. When I say complete, I really mean it. Other than some trim at the back, this is fully functioning motor. I have actually run it. I have taken it on a test drive, and that's when we got this code pop up, unfortunately. So welcome to another episode of Low Tech Garage, and today we will be replacing the high pressure fuel pumps on our Range Rover L322. Like I said, this was not expected, but here we are. A little more content for you guys, show you how to do it, and hopefully it's not too big of a job now the motor's all back together. All right, guys, well, I just wanted to jump in here real quick and let you know from a continuity standpoint with this video, I got a little misguided from what I was reading on some of the forums about how to troubleshoot the issue I was running into. So the order in which I'm going through this process may not exactly make sense, but what I'm gonna do is at the end of the video, give you a rundown of how you should approach a fuel system diagnosis on this with the tools you would have in a shop. Obviously, I'm not a dealer. I do not have everything and the ability they do, but hopefully this helps you guys out if you're in a situation like I am, because I was actually running into a couple of different issues that had me chasing my tail here. And I'm hoping that I can give you an outline of basically where to start and then procedurally kind of check those in order of operations that hopefully should save you some time and money. So we'll get back to the video, and then like I said, at the end, I'll run through that with you. They are on the bench. These are two Bosch replacements. I can put the part numbers in the description below for you guys. Bosch is the OEM manufacturer. So you can see here, it's upside down, but made in Germany. There are two of these pumps on the side of the engine, and I have a suspicion only one is failing. The code I am getting, I'll put the screenshot up now, but it's basically saying I have low fuel pressure on the rail, and fundamentally the truck is still running, but it's down on power and there's a little bit of a pulsing in the idle. Everything I've read says it's these guys. Most people seem to see failures kind of around the 100,000 mile mark, give or take. We're at 132,000 miles, so definitely seems like it's time for one of these to go. As we're having to dig in to do this, I didn't want to mess around, guess which ones failed. We're just replacing both of them. So that's enough talking about it. Time to get stuck in and see if we can get these pumps replaced. So you meet me here on the passenger side of the vehicle. You can see all the lovely new suspension we put in. And you can see I've already taken basically the trim cover off that we have put back in. And as we get closer, we can try and point out where these pumps are hiding, and you'll see exactly why I mentioned it would take maybe 15 minutes to do this job when we were torn down to a short block, but now I'm not so sure. So here we are. This is the axle going back into the front differential, and if we scoot in, you can kind of see up here, this is the motor mount we replaced, and it's kind of hard to see because we have this is the frame that holds everything, kind of the subframe in the front. Let me see if I can get back here. Yep. So that right here, rubber isolator, behind that is one of the pumps, and lurking in front is the other one. So accessibility, not that great. I am really hoping I can kind of reach through here, get some tools on this, and get them out without having to pull the front suspension out. I've seen some folks say that they pull like the front axle and all that stuff out, and I'm just really hoping I can avoid that as I've just put this all together. So with that, I think it's time to get stuck in and see what we need to do to get all of this off. Not gonna lie, not exactly thrilled that I have to do this. However, I'm glad it presented itself right when we got the truck started, and it's still in the shop. We can get this taken care of. A lot better than getting a couple 100 miles on it and it being broken again. So nonetheless, let's get started on getting these pumps in, and we'll check back here in a minute. All right, well, I got the first one out, which honestly is awesome. I was not sure, like I said, seen a few videos where folks have basically had to remove the front axle again and the surrounding suspension, and I was really hoping I wouldn't have to do that. And at least for the back pump, I was able to do it. However, I did run into a little problem. I was wondering if this would happen, and it did. It kind of surprised me though, as far as what happened. So let me take you down here, show you what's going on. Expected a little bit of fuel, but what we've got here is oil, and basically you'll see it on the time lapse as well. Because of where these pumps are located, they're deep enough down in the block where they're pretty submerged in oil, especially when the vehicle is jacked up like this. It's a little hard to see in there, but you see the little gold way back there? That's the oil running out of the block, which unfortunately is brand new oil, but there's not much we can do other than just kind of press on with this project, get the other pump out, and then get the new ones in as soon as we can, so hopefully we don't lose too much. So let's run over to the bench real quick. We can take a look at the pump we just took out, and then we'll get on to the front one as well. And here we are. So this is what we just removed, and here are the new ones. Let me get the little insulation blanket off. This is basically just to mute the sound that these pumps make, all with the goal of making really the vehicle quieter. So I'm going to try and get this off without damaging it so we can switch it over to the new one when we do the install. So let me do that, and then we'll come back and take a look at it. And here it is. Not really much to see. I think when these fail, it's more of an internal failure, so not much we're going to see here. And then here's the insulating mat that goes around it. Obviously you want to be careful when you remove this so you don't rip it. I think really plan of action for me is go get the other one out so we can get this moving. So like I said, I don't lose too much more oil. So let's get back to it. Well, in true car project fashion, the very last bolt was a little bit of a doozy. It is accessible, however, it is tucked very close to the alternator and you're sort of accessing it blind from underneath. But nonetheless, I was able to get both of the pumps out without removing any of the suspension components, which is awesome. So let's go over to the bench, show you what we got, and then we can start talking about what the steps are for reassembly. So here they are. These guys right here are the originals. This is kind of like a little lifter tappet. When I first took the back one out, that was still against the cam. There's like a lower shaft that these are run off, not the main camshafts, obviously. But I got this one out. This one came out with the front pump as well. So yeah, they're both off, both insulators. So really now it is just a reinstallation of what we just did. So it is only actually 4 bolts total. Obviously start with the front pump. That's the tricky one. I'm gonna clean a few things up, do my typical, put some Vaseline around this. We'll probably clean this lifter and put some lubricant on it. And then we're going to get back under the Range Rover and start the reassembly process. The one other thing to consider, obviously there's the stainless steel hard lines that run up to the fuel injectors. It was a little bit of a wrestle to get one of those pipes off. What I found, just as a tip, once you get both bolts out of the pump, I actually rotated that front pump forward like this, and it allowed it to basically roll out of the fitting once it was undone, and then I could just pull the pump right out. So just a little tip if you're doing this yourself, rolling it forward allows for it to pop out, and then you'll just pull it right out. So hopefully it's not too much of a pain when I put this pump back in, but I guess I'm about to find out. Well, as anticipated, that front pump was kind of a pain to put in. However, I got it. Little detail, I didn't have to do this when I removed the pumps, but let me show you what I did in order to get the front pump in and then be able to get the very front hard line in as well. And you find us at the top of the motor, and we basically have this junction here of all the high pressure fuel lines coming in. In the end, and it required taking a coil out to access this, but we had to undo this, and down there, this guy, and also the retaining bolt that holds this mess to the cylinder head. And then also, let me see if I can brighten it up. There we go. Right there, I took the nut off, and then I was able to actually pull this forward, and it allowed me to rock the whole line back and forward enough to just give me enough space to move the hard line back on top of the pump once it was installed. So here we are, and a little hard to see, but there and there are the new pumps and their little isolators, and obviously we got the starter wire hooked up again. Everything clipped back where it should be, just as it left the factory. So that really leaves us with just putting the plastic trim cover that is in this area back in. Then we can get a wheel on and get this back on the ground. So I'm gonna go ahead and get those steps done, get the truck back on the ground, and then I guess we're back in the situation where we gotta start it and keep our fingers crossed that code goes away and the restricted performance equally leaves us, and we are back in business. Well, she's back on the ground. And we all know what that means. So I'm gonna see if we can get this thing started up and keep my fingers crossed that these pumps did the trick. Well, we're inside the Range Rover. Let's see what we can get. Probably not gonna start right away as it has to prime the fuel system again, but let's give it a go. Oh, she goes. All right, let's check it out. All right, well, she's running. Just coming off fast idle right now. Obviously the fuel system had no fuel in it. And it looks like it's raising itself up. So I'm just gonna let it run for a few minutes, get any air out of the lines, and see how she behaves. All right, well, we are continuing our fueling saga. Quick update. I have been waiting for the best part of a week for this fuel pressure sensor for my fuel rail, which unfortunately is derailing getting videos out to you guys. However, with that, I have actually been continuing to research this issue, trying to understand exactly what could be going on. And the one thing that stood out to me with all my research is this. The low pressure fuel pump, which is kind of more like a traditional fuel pump that you would have in a normal car inside the tank, is expected to deliver 80 to 100 PSI of fuel to the rail. And then it's our mechanical pumps that we put in that then boost that PSI up anywhere from 1500 to 2000. What we were seeing on the live data once the engine was running is actually the longer it ran, the pressure from the high pressure pumps was just tailing down and down and down and down and down, well lower than that range. I think for me, I saw it like low 400s and still sinking. And usually when I see that, that's when the truck starts running rough. And also when we get the P0087 code, which is low fuel pressure. The one thing I noticed though is when I did like the door open, which primes the system, I could take live data then. That's just the in-tank pump priming the rail. When I did that, I was only seeing about 57 PSI. So that's making me wonder, as much as I am changing this fuel pressure sensor, it could be my in-tank pump that is a problem. It is also the last piece of the puzzle in the fuel system, other than double checking the timing. On the timing topic, I have gone back and reviewed all my pictures from doing the timing, and every picture shows the timing in the correct spot with the timing tool in and locked. So I find it quite hard to believe that that could have skipped time. So that will certainly be our last resort at troubleshooting this code. So as I'm still waiting on the pressure sensor, we are going to get in the back of the truck. We're going to expose the fuel pumps. When my fuel pressure sensor comes on Monday, we can basically put that in. We can try it, see if that works. I'm starting to think that really isn't going to solve our problem. That will allow me to quite quickly get the fuel pump out, make sure I understand exactly what I need, and get one of those on order on Monday. And I've got all my fingers crossed that that gets us back on the road. And on the L322, you find me in the back. We have the rear seats folded up, and basically the fuel tank is here under the vehicle. So we need to be able to get this carpet all pulled up and out of the way. To do that, we need access behind this side panel over here. And to do that, we need to kind of get this trim piece up top out of the way as well. Same on the side I'm standing. My understanding is we have to remove these latch bars out the way because of the way the carpet's molded. And then fundamentally, all of this will pull up and we can kind of pull it, tie it out the way, and we should expose the access ports to the fuel tank. That's enough talking. Let's get this floor exposed. All right, well, that wasn't too bad. Pretty straightforward. Show you one thing I learned because I almost broke a trim panel. So hopefully this helps you not do that. But let's hop in the truck. I'll show you where we're at. And this is what we're working with. So the upper trim here is gone. The lower trim here is gone. And as you can see, we have the carpet just tied back, just out of the way. And that is revealing where we can access the fuel pumps. So pretty straightforward. The one piece, like I said, I mentioned, I almost broke something. Up here, there's a T30, and it is conveniently hidden. You can actually see, sorry, right here, whoop, right here, behind the airbag plastic. So I was pulling on this, and on one side it popped off. Thankfully, it didn't break anything. I will still be able to reuse the bolt. But if you're doing this, pop this little piece off, take the T30 out, and then it comes right out. But here we are. Really looks like 4 10mm bolts on each side. So I will probably go ahead and get those undone, remove those hats, and see what we're working with down below. So we have the covers up in the floor, and this is what we find. So this appears to be the pump assembly on this side. Looking at the amount of dirt here and the fact that we still have this seal makes me think this is all original, which honestly is potentially a good sign. You can see I've unplugged the main connector here, and I did just kind of wipe this off to see what was going on. But really, this is how we get to the fuel pump assembly. And here's the one on the driver's side. Equally, you can see where I've kind of cleaned everything up. But this appears to be all original as well, which, like I mentioned, probably a positive thing. Well, I have a sneaky suspicion that I forgot to record a few things. I did snap a few pictures, but the outcome of not completely resolving the fuel pressure issue on the Range Rover. So I did some research, and I can also show this. I took some live data readings and was seeing that the fuel pressure was basically falling off after we come off idle and things are warming up. And I thought, for peace of mind, I should replace the fuel pressure sensor on the fuel rail. Now, my reading says they don't fail very often, and come to find out that is true. I did snap some pictures of what I found, so I'll pull those up on the screen now. But basically, you saw in the head gasket video how to put on the fuel rail, fuel injectors. I basically did the inverse of that, which may be slightly annoying having to pull it all out again. I got the rail on the bench and was able to remove the sensor. You may be able to do this with it in the car, but it's definitely a tight squeeze down the back of the motor. And to give you an idea of how much of a tight squeeze, there it is lurking at the back of the fuel rail. So you may be able to use a large wrench and get to it. It's definitely tricky though. And for me, I just took the rail back off, got it on my bench, and I was able to get it out. And what I found was there was some weird residue on the end of the sensor. I assume that's from the ethanol gas over the years. And also it was in the end of the fuel rail as well. So I cleaned that all out. And equally, as you can see, the plug itself was broken. So for me, I thought, you know what, let's just put a brand new sensor in, get the peace of mind that it's seated properly in the harness. And also we don't have any of that residue that may have found its way into the sensor in there as well. And we can make sure the readings we're getting from the live data are accurate. So for those that are interested, this is the part I got, OEM Bosch. I did get that reinstalled, so I apologize that I didn't film all of it. If I do have some clips, I'll definitely put it up now. So now knowing I have a brand new sensor on the fuel rail and knowing I have brand new high pressure fuel pumps, it really tells me there's something wrong with the in-tank pump assembly. I managed to get this piece out of the tank. The fuel supply line goes in here. And basically, after kind of doing some research, this is actually more of your fuel filter assembly that goes in the tank. And then still in the tank right now is the pump assembly and like float switch. So we're gonna go over to the tank and work on getting that out. It is completely inside the tank, so I'm not sure how well I can film it, but I'll do my best. I am really hopeful that when I replace the low pressure pump and new filter, at that point, the entire fuel system from front to back is brand new. I had all the fuel injectors cleaned by Boost Lab. They all came with their own flow numbers. They all flowed out above factory specifications. So I'm confident those are good and working. We have the new high fuel pressure pumps. We have the new fuel rail pressure sensor. So if we do the low pressure side or the lower pressure side, from my perspective, we should be in a position where our fuel pressure issues are resolved. So let's get to it.
So not a great view, but you can see the fuel pump lurking down in there. We're gonna have to try and snake this out. There is some gas in here. Hoping I can do this without having to drain the tank down. So let's give it a shot.
Here's the new pump assembly. Checked it against the one I just pulled out and everything matches, which is great. Everything looks like it's all kind of OEM hookup. This is a Continental brand, so I'll put the link in the description below for those that are looking for it. Yeah, this ran about 200 bucks, so not terrible. So really now we got to snake this down through the opening over here, right here into the abyss. And then this is the locking mechanism. So you have to push this all the way down like that. And that's what will allow it to get locked in place in the tank. This is all to the filter assembly, which I'm still waiting on. Fuel supply line. And then we've got this little plug right here. That actually goes to the other fuel level sensor, which is lurking on that side of the tank. So you have to kind of reach in from here and hook that up. I recommend plugging that in first before latching the pump into its locating point. So let's get started. All right, well, the fuel filter has arrived, so we can finish up the lower pressure fuel pump installation. I have the new pump in the tank, but we have to get that filter on so we can seal up the tank some more. And here's the old pump I pulled out. Admittedly, nothing really jumps out as wrong other than it appears to be original. This thing kind of popped out of the opening here when I was pulling it out, but I wouldn't say that was anything critical. For those that are doing the install, I can't remember if I pointed this out already, but you have to basically press the spring-loaded piece down, and there's a provision in the top of the tank that it all slots into, and then this just kind of works almost like a dowel to locate it. A little fiddly because you can't see very well, but not that bad. So yeah, I have the pump in. I'll try and show you guys that when we go to put the filter in. This is the old filter. And then if we come over here, here's a new one. I think Continental, they were listed as OEM. It said VDO. When I ordered it, this is what showed up. But certainly looks and feels equivalent when it comes to weight and quality. So let's get this over to the gas tank and get it installed. And here we can see inside the tank, that's the new pump located in place. You can see the fuel strainer for the inlet. And if we go right there, the black hose connecting to it, that's the line that will feed up into the high pressure pumps. So I've also connected this to the level sensor on the other side of the tank already. It's just one plug. Actually looks quite similar to this one. So yeah, we just have to connect all this stuff up to the fuel filter, and then I think we will be well on our way. All right, well, that was not too bad. Everything just kind of plugs into place. It's pretty self-explanatory. There are quite a few things that you do have to connect in the tank, so just pay attention to that when you are taking things apart. Like I mentioned, there is another fuel level sensor on the driver's side of the tank, so you have to make sure you plug that in. Also, there are two plugs on the filter itself. You need to make sure those are plugged in, and the assortment of supply and return hoses, and obviously make sure you put them back where they came from as well. And here you find the almost finished product. So this is the return line right here. There's a plug. This actually comes through the hat here that we'll plug in a minute. I still need to put the lock ring on, and obviously we have to kind of crank that down to make sure it's nice and tight, no vapors come out as well. So I'm gonna clean up the lock ring. It was covered in a bunch of road dirt and stuff. I want it to be nice and clean down there like everything else we've done. Then we'll hook the truck up in the morning and keep our fingers crossed that we have that magical 80 to 100 PSI fuel pressure, supplying our high pressure fuel pumps and hopefully resolving our restricted performance issue. So I'm gonna get to it and and we'll be back here in a little bit. And this is where we landed. So I think I got this on the GoPro, but we are, tuck you guys here, plugged in on the fuel pump side. Locking rings all sealed up nicely on both sides. So we're sealed up here. And I have to admit, that went a little faster than anticipated, and I am anxious to know if this fixed the problem. So I think I'm gonna open up the door here, hook up the battery, and let's give this a shot. All right, guys, well, moment of truth. Got the battery hooked up. We're in the Range Rover. Opened the door and I heard what sounded like the pump prime, so that's always a good sign. But let's see if we can get it to start up. Like usual, I imagine it's gonna crank a few more times than normal, primarily because obviously stuff drained out of the supply line, most likely. But hey, let's give it a shot and keep our fingers crossed. Uh-oh. Well, I wasn't expecting that. Let's see if it goes away in a couple minutes. All right. Well, as promised, I wanted to give you guys an overview of the best way to troubleshoot the fuel system on one of these Range Rovers. And I thought, you know what, let me just first run through the critical components of the fuel system and then where to start and what to check. So if we start at the back of the vehicle, we have the in-tank fuel pump. You'll see it in the diagnostics tool, sometimes listed as the lift pump, but that is kind of more of your traditional high pressure fuel pump in a fuel injection system, not to be confused with the actual high pressure fuel pumps that are on the side of the motor. So you have that, and you also have your fuel filter back there. Then as you move along the fuel system and basically to the motor, you will find yourself at the high pressure fuel pumps. Now, as I mentioned in the video, these are actually driven off a little camshaft lower in the block. I think I did post a diagram of what that looks like, and it is very important that that stays in time with the rest of the timing gear on the motor, as it does have cam lobes that are basically actuating those pumps to make sure you get the peak fuel pressure at the right time for your fuel injectors. And then as you come up the fuel lines from the high pressure side, you find yourself at the fuel rail. Now, on the end of one of the fuel rails, you will have your fuel pressure sensor that you did see me replace in this video. Obviously, that's important. That's gonna give you the fuel pressure readings to let you know how the fuel system downstream is performing. And then last, but certainly not least, you have your fuel injectors. And so those obviously go straight in the motor, and in the end are dictating the amount of fuel by delivery of what's actually getting in the motor and when. So for troubleshooting this issue, make sure you have a scan tool that can give you live data. And as I mentioned, the tip that kind of tipped me off on mine, at least one of them, was when you open the door, it primes the in-tank fuel pump, and you can get a live data reading off of that at that moment in time. In this case, this is how I noticed that my in-tank pump was on its way out. Also, with your high pressure pumps, it can show if you have issues there. In my case, I also saw the high pressure system when I first started. I would get the reading I want. And then basically I feel like because the in-tank pump could not hold up, that's why I was seeing the pressure bleed off over time. You can also check your fuel trims. That will give you an idea if the fuel injectors are behaving consistently bank to bank. If you're seeing numbers that are way off side to side, that could also point to a fuel injector issue as well. And when it comes to the fuel pressure sensor, honestly, most of the things I read actually said they don't go bad that often. So if you're getting a reading that sort of makes sense or potentially is within the realm of reason, I wouldn't necessarily bother replacing that right out the gate. For me, I think I showed you guys, but I had a broken plug that was really bothering me, and I thought, you know what, as I'm going through this whole motor already and the fuel system, I just wanted to do it for peace of mind. But I would say that is a low priority on parts that should be replaced while going through the fuel system diagnosis. So we'll talk fuel injectors first, and this is one of the items that threw me through a loop here. As I mentioned, I had mine professionally cleaned. However, I'm just gonna say it, I really do not recommend this. Basically, I had an injector that was missing, and I had a pretty strong misfire under partial load. You could basically feel like a cylinder was cutting out. Thankfully, I had access to another used set of fuel injectors. I swapped those in, and admittedly, they are tired. However, that kind of miss disappeared completely. So in the end, I would highly recommend, if you're considering fuel injectors of any type, just buy OEM new ones. Especially on these early vehicles, I think that is the way to go. And lastly, I kind of touched on it, it's going to be your fuel pump timing for the high pressure fuel pumps. I did run into an issue with this in full transparency, and it kind of caught me off guard. I did not film it because I did not think that I had this issue. I reviewed all my pictures of the reassembly from when I did the timing chains. You could see the timing tools were in place until final assembly where I was putting the vacuum pump back on the motor. All the main chains were back on. So to me, there was no way that this could have gone out of time, but I was wrong. You may remember one of the while I was in there tasks was resealing my vacuum pump because it was leaking. Well, come to find out, one of the little oil scrapers that runs around inside there basically got jammed. I was not aware of this, but when I was putting the stretch belt back on the motor, I was rolling the engine over clockwise as you're supposed to, and all of a sudden, everything locked. Obviously, I was concerned. It seemed off because I had rolled the motor over probably 5, 6, 7 times already. Before I'd put that pump on, there was no binding, everything rolled over as anticipated. And so what I did, and this was my fatal mistake, I moved the motor back, I would say probably less than 180 degrees. And basically in that moment, although I wasn't aware of it, it allowed my little camshaft for the high pressure pumps to skip time. It actually jumped 1 tooth. So obviously it says it in the workshop manual, and I'm telling you, absolutely do not, for any reason, roll this motor backwards. So anyway, I hope you guys find this helpful. I know this is a longer video already, but I wanted to run through this at the end because honestly, I wasted so much time chasing my tail on this. Obviously, some things I thought were known good were not. And so I hope this helps you when it comes to diagnosing this, really troubleshoot in the order of operations that will save you some time and money as well. So that's where we're gonna wrap this video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, especially if you came here for Land Rover content. It appears I have plenty more of that coming, but as I've promised in the last few videos, my Jag is next on deck. I have all the parts I need now ready to do the whole front end overhaul that I'll be sharing with you there as well. So please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and certainly drop me a comment. I do my best to respond to all of you. And with that, I'll see you all on the next episode.